Death Battle came a little early this time with the release of the latest episode, Shigaraki vs. Mahito. This is one of the episodes that was a Kickstarter backer reward, and I think it was probably the first one that not everyone was on board for when they did it. Most of the Kickstarter backer matches, everyone was on board. There's only like 2, I think, that people were less than thrilled for. I think this was one of them. Not that people didn't want this one, but it definitely felt more along the lines of, this is an episode that people will be excited for when it happens, but not 100% on board for. But it has happened, and here it is. Personally, I was on the My Hero Academia train pretty early. Like, I was reading that manga for a while. I fell off at one point, but that was kind of just because whenever you're caught up on a manga for a while, you kind of forget what's happening, because the thing that like they're talking about in context happened, 10 chapters ago, and reality that was several months ago, so I forget. So sometimes it's like I need to like go back, reread, or just let some chapters build up, and that's what happened with My Hero Academia. I still enjoy the series, it's fun. Shigaraki though is like not the most compelling villain to me. He definitely has his moment. Comparatively, Jujutsu Kaisen is one of the biggest things that have Shonen Jump in the last like 5 to 10 years. It was incredibly popular. I get why it had the kind of vibe for it. Boy, Heidi, I don't like that series. Like, none of the characters are compelling, and I also don't feel like the author respects any of them. Though I will say, Mahito is probably one of the better parts of Jujutsu Kaisen, if only for the fact that he had a very clear beginning, middle, and end to his part of the story. Like, he did what he did, and then he left. And I think that's fine. I more or less stopped reading after his part. I read a bit after it, and I'm like, I didn't care. Like, I barely cared about Mahito, but whenever like he was doing stuff, I was like, okay, there's a story happening now. Yeah, that's my kind of like quick rant about Jujutsu Kaisen. I dislike it. This matchup though it's definitely a matchup of like, they kind of just look similar, honestly, but they both at least have the similar-ish ability of just like, if they touch you, you die. But what I think of the episode overall, I thought the episode was pretty good. I did enjoy it a lot. Not as much as some other people, but I'll get into that later, and I feel that the 2 biggest things that plague the Death Battle community, outside of just, the standard stuff, the 2 of the biggest things I would say are hyperbole and recency bias. They can't get rid of those. But let's go into the episode, starting with Shigaraki. So like I said, I read My Hero Academia, and I was pretty much there the whole time, so I'm very familiar with his story. He had a very tragic backstory. No one would help him after that tragic backstory. He got picked up by the supervillain of supervillains and was groomed to be the biggest supervillain ever. Pretty fun, and there's a lot of like fun edits and such in this one. One thing they don't mention, and I feel like this happened, wasn't decay not actually his quirk? It was actually implanted into him by All For One. Like, I feel like that was a thing, but maybe I'm misremembering something. Like, I feel like he was either quirkless, or his quirk that he had was taken and then replaced with decay, which is kind of why he was like kind of all scratchy and fucked up when he was a kid, because he was essentially developing a quirk that he shouldn't have. There's a lot of stuff that they do bring up that I still never got around to, like those My Hero Academia movies, which they get the Deku Bakugo Clyde Punch feat from. That's definitely from a movie, which apparently they are canon. I just have never gotten around to seeing them, and there's like 4 of them. I should probably just like go back and like rewatch the anime. I feel like that is worthwhile to do, because I never like watched a bunch of anime. I mostly read My Hero Academia. One of the fun jokes that I definitely appreciate was the some resurrections of old boomstick jokes, such as his new name for his penis, the Intercontinental Ballistic Cruise Punch. And I couldn't remember what it was, but thank you, Death Battle Wiki. Gigantic Omega Storm is from Hulk vs. Broly. That is a Broly move. There's some good lines in Shigaraki's breakdown. Mostly just like plays on All For One. He manipulates Shigaraki's entire life all for one purpose. That's really good. It's a really good line. It's kind of hard to like go into the abilities of All For One, just because it's more or less all of them. I do appreciate that they do go into kind of what vestiges are, because that was definitely the biggest argument going into this, and because as we'll go into, a lot of Mahito stuff is based around the soul, and are quirk vestiges souls? And at the very least in this, they are more or less. I think there's more arguments that they are souls than they aren't souls. Good stuff in that breakdown, but what about Mahito? So, I'm not a JJK fan, and I didn't go through it, but I did go through all the parts with Mahito in it, so I was pretty up to date on things they brought up. Honestly, the only things that kind of threw me were like in the G1 blog, where they were scaling him to essentially events that happened later in the series, which doesn't actually happen in this. They don't really do anything like that for Mahito. Yeah, it's mostly just going over like kind of how his ability works. Idle Transfiguration. Shigaraki's ability, he touches you, you decay to nothing. Mahito touches you, you are transformed into some horrific monstrosity, and then you die because you have been transformed into some horrific monstrosity. There are definitely some parts that, like, I guess people like to bring up and point out that weren't really built, nor really tackled that hard, like Black Flash. Like, I feel like people brought that up a lot. I bring up kind of a lot in general when they talk about JJK, and it's really kind of nothing in this fight, really. They just bring it up for a little bit just to tell you that he can do that. One thing actually I've never really mentioned with these breakdowns, though, and happens near the end of Mahito's breakdown, is that they use a lot of, like, I guess, royalty-free music that they can use. Like, previously they just used music from the series, but then, you know, copyright stuff definitely got in the way of that. The one that they use in the last part of Mahito's analysis is called Honeymoon by Waylon Chan and Junichi Sasaki, and it is tonally very strange for what they talk about. It sounds like it's from a Toho game. It kind of fucks, but it's like really weird given what they are going over. And they use the funny smiling friends, frowning friends clip whenever Mahito does his little run away because he doesn't want to die. I did like it a lot. It kind of just ends, though, but that's mostly because that's where his story just kind of ends, to be fair. He runs up, Kenjaku kills him, and then the rest of the series happens. Though I will say, every time that is brought up for this fight, I forgot about the instant spirit body of Distoro killing. Like, straight up, just 100% forgot that. Like, I definitely read it. To be fair, my reading of Jujutsu Kaisen was in a weird situation because it was me waiting for jury duty is where I read Jujutsu Kaisen. But yeah, that more or less covers everything that they went into the characters. I think the editing and such for both characters was great, but also they've just kind of gotten better at editing in general. Let's talk about the extraneous things before we get into the fight, notably the voices. So in this fight, Shigaraki is voiced by Tom Shulk, who is honestly a Death Battle regular at this point. He has voiced many characters, including the Kool-Aid Man, Dio, Omni-Man, both times he was there, SpongeBob, King Seeker Frampt and Darkstalker Koth, and Megatron. So he has like a lot of characters in and a fucking weird amount of range, because Shigaraki does not sound anything like he did for Omni-Man, especially not for SpongeBob, and definitely not for fucking Dio or Megatron. Like, he's all over the place. Really, really good. I did enjoy him as Shigaraki. He has good moments. Mahito's voiced in this episode by Sean Chiplock, who is his Death Battle debut, but Sean Chiplock is a somewhat prolific anime voice actor, and does a very good job as Mahito in this episode. Other roles include Subaru in ReZero, Mista in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Part 5, and Noob Saibot in MK11, and Mishima in Persona 5, as well as a whole bunch of other stuff that is less relevant to things I would know. But yeah, very good as Mahito. I don't know what Mahito sounds like in like the JJK anime or in the dub of the anime, so I really have nothing to go over with that. Actually, no, I do know because I used that clip. It's pretty close, and I do like it. I think they both do very good jobs. And now for the other thing before the fight, the music. So this fight soundtrack is Skin Deep by Thereof Media featuring Brandon Yates. So this one I have some issues with, especially with the way it's implemented into the fight. Just because, to me, the song, it's not bad, but it is a lot of noise. Like, it feels like, especially like the vocals are not mixed right to me, and it's Brandon Yates singing in Japanese. which is neat, especially because these characters are very much in series that are explicitly Japanese. A lot of the vocals are kind of hard to hear over the rest of the music that's happening. In the actual fight itself, it just kind of doesn't feel like it enhances a lot of the fight. It doesn't feel like it's like elevating the fight. It's just kind of noise in the background that is happening. As opposed to like, even like last episode, I felt that the music in Ghost Rider vs. Spawn heavily enhanced that fight. I don't feel the same about Skin Deep. It's not bad, but it just kind of felt like noise to me a lot of the time. Speaking of, let's get into the fight. So I have a fair amount of small issues with this fight, but overall I think it's one of those fights that kind of starts a little, that has some like clunky bits, especially at the beginning, and then at the end really brings it home. Like I think more or less like the setup of like, you know, he's just kind of arbitrarily killing people in this subway is kind of whatever. I think it's more just like, because it's set in a subway, I feel like it kind of limits what we can see from Shigaraki, despite the fact that we kind of know how larger than life he is. And maybe it's just to like confine him to an area where Mahito can compete with him. Or maybe I'm just saying some bullshit. Who knows? Now, there's a lot of cool stuff. This is a fight was more or less just animated by prolific Death Battle animator Moro, who we've seen his work several times in the last few episodes of Death Battle. They did the hand-drawn elements from Stitch vs. Rocket, Phoenix vs. Raven, March Magic vs. Silver Surfer, Bill Cyber's Discord, and very notably Gojo vs. Makima. They also were more or less the main animator behind Baizo vs. Eggman, which was very good. I don't think Shigaraki Mahito is their best work. I probably would say that's Baizo vs. Eggman. However, I will say they definitely had way more time to work on Baizo vs. Eggman. Probably slightly due to the killing of Rooster Teeth. And also just resources from Rooster Teeth definitely allowed stuff like Gojo vs. Makima to also be, I think, better. But that's also because their work kind of happened in small bursts, surrounded by some pretty solid sprite animation. Whereas Shigaraki Mahito is more or less just a solo act. And there's some good stuff in there. I really love, especially whenever it happened in Buzz vs. Eggman, and it still is here, whenever it's essentially like a 2D element fighting a 3D element, which happens at least 2 occasions. One at the beginning whenever Shigaraki summons the Nomu, and then when they're in the train where Shigaraki is in his like big like hand armor form. Like I think those look really, just flow really well. I think that's because it is a 3D element, it's way easier to kind of do dynamic camera movements. There's just some weirdness, and I think one of the issues is that maybe, again, it might just be time stuff, but also I saw like people were like, apparently they can just pump out a full Death Battle animation within 2 months. So maybe this wasn't a time issue, and maybe it's just a personal issue I have. I do think that they might be better in just smaller bursts, or better at non-human things, because Baizo vs. Eggman was very good, and they're all very non-human shapes. But I feel like especially Mahito can sometimes look a little clunky. During the part where Shigaraki gets knocked onto the tracks and is like getting slapped about, I felt that part just kind of read a little weird to me. And whenever he was blasting them with his like big lightning attack, whatever that is, he just kind of pointed his hand and it's a little off. Those are kind of my main issues with the fight. Most of the other stuff is really good. Like again, the fight with those Nomus, really good. I love the bit where the Nomu throws the punch and Mahito ducks and they punch each other. Great. Pretty much when they get on the train car, I think the rest of the fight is excellent. The dialogue is great after that point. The action is great. I actually really like the look of the distorted killing body. Actually, no, I do have one more issue, and this is more just like from what I've seen of Jujutsu Kaisen and such. And I just would have liked it better if it happened. Whenever he does the domain expansion, it just says domain expansion and then it happens, and it looks very cool. But shouldn't he say the name of his domain expansion as well? Wouldn't that have been cooler? I think it would have been. It just feels like it's a beat that was missed. Also, I do think it was kind of weird that it just kind of cuts to him with the mouth open and the hands. I thought, would have been neater if they like opened the mouth. Like there was the motion of him opening the mouth to the hands. All the stuff with the vestiges was pretty sick. Like every time Mahito lands a hit on Shigaraki, you kind of see a spirit get destroyed because that's what's happening. And then you get the Sukuna version with All for One, which is a great moment. And then we get the him running away sequence, which is very fun. It's very goofy when he gets his little arms and legs on the head. And actually now I'm thinking about another issue I have, is that especially, and this actually kind of ties into a part of the reason why I'm a bit iffy on the song, is this the way the fight ends. It kind of reminds me of how Galactus vs. Unicron ended, where it just kind of feels like it ends mid-sentence. Like there's not really a cooldown. Like the song hasn't ended yet, but then they just cut to KO. Like similar how in Galactus vs. Unicron, there's not really a end of statement. It just kind of goes from just like he says his thing, and then there's no real beat to kind of grab your thoughts before it's like KO. The only real difference between Galactus vs. Unicron and this one is in Galactus vs. Unicron, they went from KO to explain shit, whereas this, there was at least like, a bit like the boomstick joke, which kind of gives you the ready yourself for the explanation. I don't know. Just kind of the toning pacing was weird for that ending. I did really like the kill though. It was very good. I like this episode, but there's a lot of little things that really bother me. And also, I'm not heavily invested in either character, so that's not going to push me further into this. I think all the arguments that they made in the rundown, the results, are all fair. I think the only thing that it feels a bit iffy is because they've started doing categories, it feels like they give survivability to Mahito kind of as a token just to kind of be like, this is more even than it is. Even though they're like, Shigaraki can take more punishment. The only difference is that he, as a spirit, or as a cursed spirit, kind of ignores damage a little bit. But then they kind of go into his powers, and but that doesn't matter for Shigaraki because he can just decay through that. Look, overall, episode's good and I like it. I just have a lot of little issues. I think a big issue is just I'm not like super thrilled by the characters. So it wasn't made for me, it was made for other people. I still like it though. If we're doing a tier list again for this season, I would say it definitely doesn't beat Ghost Rider versus Spawn. Do I like it better than Kratos versus Asura? No, I think the Kratos versus Asura, the ambition of Kratos versus Asura, I think you can feel the ambition in that one. I'd say this is so far my least favorite of this year, but that just kind of shows that this is Death Valley's been fucking quality for a while. Hopefully the quality can continue with the next episode, which is one that I helped bring into existence.
Sir, finishing this fight.
And those that tasted the bite of his sword named him the Doomslayer.
Master Chief versus Doomslayer. So this was the fight that won the rematch poll from the Kickstarter. Slight surprises happened this early, or at the very least that there isn't like a buffer between ones that we know from the Kickstarter between each other. That's kind of how it was going for a while, because we knew about Omni-Man versus Bardock, did know about Joker versus Giorno, did know about Boys vs. Eggman, did know about Among Us vs. Fall Guys, did know about Kratos vs. Asura, didn't know about Ghost Rider vs. Spawn. Did know about this, so we were kind of expecting another we didn't know about, but no, we do have one we do know about, being Master Chief versus Doomslayer. So this won against several other episodes, though I was kind of not a fan of a lot of the ones that they had in that poll. There was ones that I definitely would have wanted to see that they didn't have up there, like a Ragnar versus Soul, Urza versus Zoro, Chun-Li versus Mai, stuff like that I think would be fun to revisit. But this was definitely the biggest one, mostly because this, whenever I think of a death battle that deserved a rematch, I would consider, like, how long ago was it? Have the competitors gotten new stuff to examine? Like, has the fight changed in any way? And Master Chief versus Doomslayer is definitely probably one of the biggest ones that, like, demands it. Because since the last time this happened, there's been, like, an entire Halo trilogy and an entire Doom reboot. So there's definitely new stuff. Also, this episode came out back when Ben was animating the show in an editing software. This can be improved upon from the episode that first came out in 2011. I think that was over 10 years ago. The only issue that people definitely have with this is that thanks to Doom's reboot, the scale of power has kind of shifted extremely heavily to his favor. We'll have to see though. I think we all assume the Doom guy will win. I just want to see some cool Master Chief stuff, and we'll be there to see that one happen. Until then, see ya.